and welcome to this session, the first of the FSC ReGenerations Reimagined Conference. I'd first like to say a big thanks to our sponsors, you can see here on screen, without whom this conference wouldn't be possible, and in particular to Public Trust, who are sponsoring this session today. Tēnā koutou, ko mangatawhiri te maunga, ko Thames te awa, ko Mataroa te waka, no tamaki makaurau ahau. Craigs Investment Partners, ahau e mahi ana. Ko Helen Skinner, tōku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for joining us for this breakfast session. I'm Helen Skinner, Head of Emerging Wealth at Craigs Investment Partners, and I'll be facilitating the session this morning. This morning, we're going to hear some insights from our trustees and supervisors CEOs. I'm joined today by Ryan Bessemer from Trustees Executors, Harry Koprivcic, from Guardian Trust, and Andrew Hughes from Public Trust. So to give you some background on these gentlemen, Ryan joined Trustees Executors in 2018 as CEO and was appointed to the board as Executive Director in October 2019. He previously served as COO of Equity Trustees, Australia's largest independent listed trustee company, and currently he is also a founder and chairman of Flint Wealth, a fintech startup investment supermarket. We have Harry, who started at Guardian Trust in 2005 and became CEO of Guardian Trust Corporate Trust Division in August 2020. He has a strong background in funds management, superannuation, debt securities, structured finance, and non-bank deposit takers. And I should also disclose Guardian Trust is our supervisor at Craigs. And Andrew has joined Public Trust Corporate Trustee Services in July 2019 and is a chartered accountant with over 30 years experience in trustee and financial services industries in New Zealand and Asia. Prior to joining Public Trust, Andrew spent 15 years managing debt portfolios for global investment banks and funds across Asia. He previously in New Zealand included 7 years experience with another trustee company. So welcome, gentlemen. Before we kick off, please remember to put any questions in the Q&A section and I'll try and pick those up as we go through. Right, so let's kick off with value for money reviews. And I'm going to start with Andrew. So supervisors alongside the FMA recently conducted a pilot study of how an annual fee, so value for money review might look. What insights are you able to share with us from that pilot?
Thanks, Helen. Look, before I answer that, let me just give a little bit of background context around the process that was followed, and then I'll share a few of the public trust insights, and then I'm sure Harry and Ryan will chime in with perhaps a few insights that they have as well. So look, the FMA issued guidance on managed funds and value for money in April 21, at the same time, which seems like an eternity ago now due to COVID and all the rest, but at the same time, they also updated their guidance around performance fees with respect to KiwiSaver as well. And having done that, the TCA and the FMA then developed a framework or a methodology based on that guidance for carrying out a review so as to ensure completeness and, most importantly, consistency of outcomes. We didn't want different supervisors, different clients arriving at different conclusions around what was reasonable and what wasn't. And so, look, we then ran a pilot exercise which commenced in late July, where each supervisor selected 3 to 4 funds. The managers completed the review of their own fund using that framework, and then the supervisors and the FMA independently did their own assessment, and then met to compare the findings and share the insights. And the insights were around not only the findings, but also the methodology and any manager feedback at that time. Now, the next step, and probably the final step, is there's a meeting next week between the TCA and the FMA to kind of pin down and agree that final methodology before rolling it out across all managers and all registered funds. So let me go back to your question now, having provided that background, Helen, which was Public Trust's insights. And I've just, as I say, I've just chosen half a dozen here. There were plenty. Look, the first insight was that the version of the framework we ran with at that time was overly formulaic. It was at times repetitive, and it didn't really provide the opportunity for the managers to fully articulate and explain their value proposition. This has already been improved in a version 2 of the framework that we've come up with, and there may even be a version 3 next week. So I think we're continuing to refine and reiterate this and iterate this, and we will continue to do that over time. Second, our views and that of the FMA, so public trust views and the FMA's views, were broadly consistent around the framework and the findings. So there was no major disconnect, which I think was helpful. It'd be challenging if there were. Third, in the case of public trust clients, just to give you a little bit of background, we determined that 2 of the 4 funds tested had reasonable fees. The third was primarily reasonable, with some ongoing discussion around whether a trail that is paid without advice being specifically attached represents a fee for no service. And the 4th fund we tested, we have challenged the level of fees, and we're in discussions with the manager at the moment. Fourthly, the subject of scale, which is always relevant in this topic, was really an interesting insight for us, because we had expected to see margins increase over time as scale had increased. And as scale had increased quite dramatically, we expected to see margins might have increased quite dramatically as well. But in fact, we found they've remained fairly steady across our managers. And that is because they had invested quite heavily into additional resourcing, development of apps, et cetera, as they had grown. So clearly at some point scale is a factor, there's no doubt, but it's probably at a higher level than what we had originally thought it was going into this exercise. Fifthly, our managers tended to look at the overall fee when looking at reasonableness. So, which for KiwiSaver generally comprises both a fixed member fee and a manager fee based on FUM. There is a view that member fees play a role in ensuring that members with smaller balances are not subsidised by those with higher balances. And look, the last thing I'll just call out is that if managers are comparing their fund fees with other managed funds, they need to be mindful of ensuring the comparison group is offering similar services, and particularly when it comes to offering advice, and more importantly, providing advice. It won't necessarily be easy to determine each manager's service proposition for comparative purposes, and yet that comparative piece is highly important in terms of the value for money exercise. Look, I'll leave it at that, Helen, and perhaps hand over to my colleagues and see what insights I'd like to share from the exercise.
Yeah, and I'm really interested as well if you can dive in talking about the trail being paid and looking at things which aren't necessarily a fee but are a cost to the manager. It's an interesting one to dive into that kind of element. Harry or Ryan, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I'd say, Helen, from a TE point of view, we've pretty much have had a consistent type of experience as public trust, and I think we all have through the TCA, which is the Trust Companies Association. We do sit down and talk about our experiences and work through them. I think some of the things potentially to add is the expectation from the FMA, and I think we have been fairly consistent in our thinking up until this point. However, in the long run, I think ultimately we need potentially some further training from the FMA to sort of understand what their expectations are going forward. I think that in future state, I could probably see a disconnect happening there. So other than that, I think we'll see when it comes to the meeting this week where we go. I think, as Andrew said, some of the work I think is overly prescriptive. It makes it harder to be able to look at each of the funds to the depth that that I think is expected. So we need to come up with a better way of processing that revision, that supervision.
Harry?
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Ron. Our experience going through this pilot and working with FMA has been that the framework, as it was originally drafted, and that's why we ran a pilot to see how it's going to go, it needs to be simplified. It needs to be made workable for the issuers and managers to undertake that assessment on a regular basis. But also we looked at and look at the areas of where are the actual issues. And if you have a provider that has they already sits on comparison level, relatively low fees. There is no advisor fees attached to that product. There is no performance fee attached to that product. Does that need to be a regular review? Can there be some desktop review and simplified approach to this? And I think FMA in our discussion has accepted that the reviews and this work needs to be simplified. Some of our findings in terms of from our discussions with issuers and what we have worked with the FMA on analysis was that we were also broadly consistent with what our findings are and what FMA's findings are. That during the pilot, we did find that we had a manager that when we looked at the performance fees, I think there was some we questioned the appropriateness of use of the benchmarks around that. I think that is quite important, that the funds being true to label and what kind of benchmarks you're attaching it, whether it's an equity fund, whether it has a cash plus benchmark, and then how those fees are there and how those how that the performance calculations are determined. It is quite important, and that's probably an area that we will be, looking at closely with few of our clients. I think that we see that coming up. I think in general, looking at some of our providers, we found that they have moved on their fees. I think the number of providers in the market have taken that initial guidance, as Andrew said, that came up, a while ago, and it was highlighted even last year, have taken that guidance and embraced it and have looked at the delivery of their product, ongoing distributions of their product, management of their product, and how they actually do deliver value for money on an ongoing basis to their customers. So I think they are starting to their mind, as both of my colleagues said, there is a bit more work to be done in that area to make it workable and to make it ongoing viable review of those fees.
Do you think that it's a matter of just increasing transparency within the fees, or do you think this is a bit of a rush to the bottom? What's the feeling you're getting from the FMA on this?
Well, I certainly hope it's not a rush to the bottom, Helen. I don't think that's healthy for the industry at all. I think, we want diversity and we want new players coming in. We want competition. And if this exercise ends up in killing that, then I think it's failed. So, look, I'm hopeful. I don't think we're getting that vibe. I don't think that's where this is headed. And I think as every conversation proceeds with the FMA, I think we're kind of feeling out where these things sit. And the manager's feedback that we were able to pass on to the FMA, I think, was helpful, and I think has been taken on board. And so we'll just have to see how it goes. But my colleagues may have other thoughts.
No, I agree with Andrew. I don't see that as a rush to the bottom. I don't think it is providing a mechanism, and it is providing a tool that look, it started as a guidance for answering that 68, 70 questions, but it should be a tool for managers to assess themselves and to create their value for money story around that and say, look, this is how we distribute it. This is what our products are designed to do. We believe they're fit for purpose. They do deliver value for money. And we believe they have a place in the industry and in the market. So I agree with Andrew. It shouldn't be raised to the bottom. It should enable ongoing. The managers should have sufficient capital there to be able to innovate, to deliver different products, to be able to run those products appropriately, to ensure there's no issues around that. So I agree. I don't think this should be a race to the bottom.
I have to say as well, I don't think it should be a race to the bottom. From what I can tell, I think it's a genuine exercise. That being said, there's a lot of different types of funds out there, and I totally agree with Andrew and Harry that we need diversification out there, different types of funds, different types of investors. I'm afraid sometimes when you look at things like default KiwiSavers, that you're thinking, is it going to become a vanilla market? And I would hate to see that, and I definitely think that I'd push back very heavily against that. I'd like to see more competition in the market, and people coming up with different concepts. And I think that just drives a really healthy market. So, but like the other two have said as well, I mean, I don't necessarily see that is the case here. I think to me, it is definitely just not. It's not a fee discussion; it's a value for money discussion. And ultimately, as I say, if I'm investing, I'm looking at what ultimately my returns are going to be, and that is not just about fees, but it's also about performance, over time. So these have to be major factors.
And I'm thinking whether there's a gap fill here, because thinking of UCITS funds in other parts of the world, you have to disclose an aim for the fund, and you get an idea sometimes of the style of the manager. Do you think that's missing in the New Zealand market, and that we're actually trying to fill a gap almost with part of this value for money discussion?
I mean, I'm happy just to talk to that. I definitely think there should be greater disclosure, and I definitely feel that if you're an active or a passive fund manager, you should be very, you should disclose that. And I also think there should be fee disclosures, more heavily fee disclosures as well, because when you're paying for a fund, you're not just paying for the investment manager, but you're paying for all these other services. And when I continue to see, as regulators push the concept of fees, that there's a lot of other services that are being squeezed as well. Things like unit pricing, and so on and so forth. You don't want to be driving those costs down to bargain basement, because you're just adding enormous risk to funds.
The fees?
And absolutely, and so forth. So, to me, ultimately, I think our job as a supervisor is around consumer protection. And we don't work necessarily for the regulator. We're licensed by the regulator, but we work for the unit holders, for the investors. And ultimately, to me, it's about what the best outcome for investors is.
Yeah, just to go to your question, Helen, I do think maybe there is that articulating of investment strategy and what the manager is trying to achieve it with creating that product, whether that product is fit for purpose. And I think, look, that could be articulated, in some instances a bit better, because that is important. Yeah, that story is important, that I choose the manager because I believe in the manager's, investment strategy and style. I do want to go. And look, markets will go against me sometimes because, I might choose a manager that doesn't like to hedge, or I like to, it is all different approaches, but articulating that it is quite important. And if that delivery, and look, we have a long way to go and compared to the rest of the world about investor education and all that, it's a separate topic altogether. But investors are starting to get more educated and going forward. That will be quite important to understand, look, I want to go to that manager because I believe in its investment strategy. I believe what we're trying to deliver. I believe in some of the principles that they are working through, and they're important to me as well.
I think it's a bit of a, I don't really have too much more to add, Helen. I think it's a bit of a mixed bag at the moment. I think some articulate their aims very, very well. That's really their main selling point. Is almost, some are almost cult-like, which is fine. I think if they articulate that well and that's what people want, look, I think that's fantastic. I think maybe the challenge is, once you articulate your aim, you jolly well better stick to it, because you've put a stick in the ground and you've told investors that's what you're doing, and so that may restrict your flexibility a little bit to dabble here and there, which others are. Which some want to do. So I think, by not having an aim, you can kind of be aimless, right? You can kind of do anything. But I think that's definitely the direction we should be going on. And as I say, I think some do it very well right now, and some are relatively silent.
That's a perfect lead into our next topic as well, when we're talking about disclosure elements. So I think we should move on there to responsible investing disclosures. So talking about, in December 2020, the FMA released a guidance note on disclosures for products that incorporate non-financial factors like ESG, which they're calling integrated financial products. So it talked about debt securities like green bonds and managed investment products where they're claiming non-financial impacts. It also highlighted the need for substantiating ESG statements, and this is a topic I'd like to start off with. And maybe I'll go to Harry first. What's some of the observations that you have in regards to managers substantiating those ESG statements?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I think that's leading in from Andrew's note and your introduction. I think when that guidance came out, it talked about a lot about disclosure and managers, having overall impression what they are trying to achieve with that product. What we talked about earlier, where is their aim, what they're doing, what are they trying to deliver. They need to look at what are the novelties that they're introducing into that product. Is it the complexity of the product, what it counts, and I believe that this is the ESG and responsible investing is going to become more and more important for investors, especially younger generations that they're coming through. But if the key is whatever the overall description is, it is important to need to have this statement substantiated. Managers will have policies and statements, that in their offer documents. Some issues will highlight ESG consideration as one of their key benefits in order to attract investors. And as they should also, the managers should build a framework around their policies and their statements. And that governance framework is very important because, it ensures proper oversight of those statements and made by the issuer, and ensuring that there are controls and processes in place to implement and address any identification, reporting, potential non-compliance, and ongoing review of those policies. I guess, there are complexities with that because, a number of managers are outsource their investment managers, and some of the managers do adopt that, those type of policies of their outsource managers. But they do need to ensure that their governance controls and framework has controls in place to ensure ongoing monitoring of those outsource providers. And I guess the key is also when choosing the outsource provider, if the managers are adopting some of the policies and some of the statements that outsource providers, it's quite important that the managers undertake that due diligence at the start of it to ensure what kind of controls and frameworks and processes that underlying investment manager has in place to ensure ongoing compliance and delivery. Because there are certain statements, like if you look at the Kiwi setting with their hard exclusions, and they are sometimes easier to monitor. There are also soft exclusions. There are also discrepancies. There's also discretionary element to it. Or we will reduce our exposure to for example, to fossil fuels. Well, what does that really mean? Reduced exposure to fossil fuels. Are we talking about fossil fuels producers? Are we talking about distributors? There's a lot of complexities around there. So I think it is if those statements are clear, they're easier to monitor and ensure compliance with it. The more gray they are, the more difficult it does becomes. And I think it will be quite important for investors to ensure how compliance with those policy and those statements is ensured to ensure their delivery.
Just before I move on to the other two, I just wanted to ask on that because the FMA has mentioned that any product with this sort of integrated products, they expect there to be additional complexity. But ESG can be seen really as a risk framework a lot of the times. And I think a lot of managers actually do ESG without realising it because you're looking at factors of governance, social impacts, environmental. So do you think that's adding complexity to it, or do you see it as a way that every manager should operate?
I do think if managers do have a policy, that does add a little bit more complexity and oversight over that, and the portfolio, especially if you have tracking portfolio, if you have policy over that, to make sure that some of those assets are excluded from those portfolios that you would generally, especially underlying managers, would track. So there is a bit more complexity to that, and I do know that managers, that some part of those statements, part of the policy will continue to be part of the manager's governance framework. But I think monitoring and compliance and review of those frameworks is very important and should be, there should be a closer attention paid to that as well.
Okay. Brian, Andrew?
I just think it comes down to, once again, we can't report on data you don't collect. And even when it comes to a lot of company reporting, I mean, there's no real accounting standards, internationally in place, et cetera, around reporting. So when you're a fund and you do need to report from an ESG perspective, it's very difficult when you're not getting that underlying data. And I think it comes back down to not only the investment managers, but really changing the way the world works from that. The markets work from that reporting perspective and around disclosures and so forth. So I think there's still quite a journey to have here.
Andrew?
Yeah, look, I think it's pretty much been said. The only other call out I'd make is the FMA also issued guidance recently around advertising. And I think if you're going to lead with your advertising around this ESG piece, then it becomes doubly important that you can prove what you've said in your advertising. So I think there's a real tie in there between the greenwashing and the advertising piece. And I think we need to just be careful. As supervisors, we need to be doubly careful around that.
Unmute. On the back of that, we've got the climate-related disclosures coming through in the TCFD work that's happening. Have you had much involvement with that? What's your views on how ready the supervisor world is, let alone the managed schemes that are going to be captured by this?
Yeah, we have started engagement with some of our managers on that and ensuring that the ongoing compliance with that disclosure. There's a bit more work to be done there, and I think managers have have started to turn their mind on that perspective. I think from supervisors' perspective, it is quite important that we have a good oversight over those, and we understand the managers' processes and policies in place, how they're developed and how they ensure their ongoing compliance. We review those governance frameworks. We review the frameworks to ensure the managers can comply with those requirements as well. And I think it's important that we then, as supervisors, look at those processes and test them as well. It's the same way that we would expect the managers, going to the previous topic, to when they oversee their underlying investment managers' compliance, that they test those compliances. So should supervisors as well. And we should build a good reporting framework around managers, assess the risk associated with the policy and how complex it is, or how, whether it's something new that they're looking at, and then build a reporting framework to ensure ongoing compliance with that.
Ryan, Andrew, anything to add to that one?
I agree with Harry. I think it's from our perspective, we've got a little bit more work to do on that. I think the industry does in general. So I think it's just waiting for further guidance.
Yeah, I guess just a shout out to my colleagues in the accounting world. This is going to be reasonably prescriptive, which I think is helpful for us as supervisors. So we know what's expected, and we'll be able to measure it against what's expected, and that it's being carried out and fulfilled. It doesn't impact everyone in round one, but it will eventually catch up. So it's something we need to turn our minds to. But I don't really have much more to add to what Harry articulated.
Do you think that through this, and we'll see a bit of a cultural shift and more of engagement on this side, particularly around the environmental aspects and ESG?
Oh, I think absolutely. I'm not sure there's a manager out there now that doesn't have an ESG fund or all their funds are ESG compliant. So we are going to see more of that. And I think you're actually going to get real call outs where you've got a manager who has got ESG compliant funds and non-ESG compliant funds, and therefore what is that manager's view of the world? So I think the pressure is going to be on that it'll be an outlier if your fund does not consider ESG in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it will be increasingly important for generations, I think, to have that. I think we see where the world is moving. We see what with some of the conferences, what's coming out of across from other parts of the world, and I think it will be increasingly more important to have that overlay to consider non-financial impact of delivering and structuring the product as well, and I think that will become more and more important to investors going forward.
I was even asked the same question from the FMA from a supervisor's perspective. We ourselves, from TE perspective, are building out a quite comprehensive ESG policy for our business. And the question was, what does that mean to the organisations, to the funds that you supervise? And will you continue to supervise funds that don't have those same levels of disclosures, etc., than what we would expect to see? So, it's a good question, and from my perspective, there's certain business we do and don't take on. There's always been that sort of moral line when we go, no, we won't touch that sort of product. But how does that work now? With ESG, and it's a big question we're asking ourselves as an organisation.
It's a good call out, Ryan, because from the governance piece, it's always quite clear, if it's business you want or not, right? And then from the from the social, maybe it's a little bit easier as well. The environmental one just gets a little more challenging for us, I guess, doesn't it? But good call out.
Absolutely. I mean, with say modern day slavery, you go, well, definitely as an organisation, but it is difficult, particularly with the environmental ones, because it's quite a new topic to be putting on the table there. Because we're used to social, we're used to governance. It's the E.
And the emissions requirements right through to scope 3, which is a new thing for a lot of people, and how are we actually going to be able to measure that for those that, forcing those to disclose around the country, etc. Yeah. Okay. Probably good timing to move on to a next kind of topic, which is talking about, how you should manage what clients you should take on. I want to touch on the new products which we're seeing coming to the market. So things like micro investing platforms, cryptocurrencies, that sort of thing. And it raises a question around consumer protection and whether there should be changes to regulatory parameters. So I'm going to kick off with Ryan, because this is a bit of your world. So where do you think there are gaps in regulatory oversight at the moment?
I think the mandate that the FMA has and other regulators has been great for the world that we have been in, but obviously the world does continue to change and adapt, and I think we need to look at what the role of, say, the supervisors is, what the role of the regulator is going forward, and how do we manage to supervise and some of these new products and services coming through, and also to go back and look at potentially some of the gaps that we've had in the past. Definitely there's new digital innovations. There's more and more push into online micro investing platforms. You would say, you potentially argue that these platforms already sell regulated products, but at the same time you are able to go and build and manage your own portfolio on there. And I'd say, just like advisors, platforms are products, and advisors are regulated, and I believe that there's a lot of risk in platforms, and that platforms should be regulated as well. It is about consumer protection. It's about making sure that there's the appropriate tools and mechanisms out there, whether it be access to advice, access to research, access to education, when you're making these types of investment decisions. And probably not as important if you're just spending $20 on half an app on part of an Apple share just because you want to dabble. But if you really are out there trying to build wealth on a platform, there is a significant risk there, particularly if you don't have that sort of education or experience. On top of that, you see cryptocurrencies and things like NFTs or non-fungible tokens out there coming to the market. Virtually anyone around the world can create these types of products or currencies. I view them more as investment products rather than currencies myself. I think they're definitely, if you look at how they're categorized, I think they're investment products. But how are they created? What backing do they have to them? All that sort of stuff. You're investing in, and how do you continue to value these products, and how can you ensure what you know enough about how they perform to know what the future, or to be able to at least guess what the future outcome may be. And I believe there's not enough. There's no regulation necessary behind who can issue a cryptocurrency, who can issue an NFT. There's no regulation there. Anyone can do it. So it's really just coming back down to applying some of those basic industry standards that we do for other types of products and services, and saying how do we monitor them, regulate them, and supervise them. Obviously, with cryptocurrencies, we now have something like, I think the FSC research this year said something like 21% of Kiwis are already investing to a degree in cryptocurrencies. That sort of is a little bit scary to me. I know how cryptocurrencies work, and I wouldn't be necessarily going out there investing a lot of money in cryptocurrencies. Maybe on some of the older ones like your Bitcoins or whatever, but some of the new ones coming through I definitely wouldn't be touching. So how are people making those types of investment decisions, and where does the education come from? So I just definitely there's definitely for me room for further regulation around a number of these types of products and services.
Harry, Andrew, chip in?
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. I think it's quite important to know that we, in looking at managed investment schemes in that sector, we have very well regulated and very working legislative framework. You're looking what has happened with the Hayden inquiry in Australia with looking at the misconduct. We have framework here that provides that you have supervisors that get very close and understand the managers' processes and controls, and you have then any issues they do report to the FMA. So FMA is kept abreast of all the issues across the markets and all the trends. Now, if you have what Ryan was saying, if you have operators that are offering products that are not regulated, there is no oversight. There's a lot of risks associated with that. And I guess the only thing you have to wait until something goes wrong to see, well, who has been overseeing the performance of those entities, and how do they comply with their obligations? Because if there is a gap, I think that, and I know FMA have indicated earlier that they will look at some of those areas. But I think it is important that you do have on the fringes, that you don't have, and also you look at managers like yourselves as well, Helen, like that are compliant, that have all this governance framework around your products, and then you have someone else being able to offer the product and not need to comply and have overlay of all those costs. And that is not fair. And I think it's quite important that we have a lot more education about, and all the stakeholders, including investors, which products are regulated, which products, and what are the risks associated with those products. We only look at NIDO and what has happened with some of the property developers as well, where, and even though there might be wholesale, and what's wholesale these days, investors have a lot of money, can sell a house in Auckland, and, you would have a lot of capital behind you. So I think it is quite important, and I do agree with Ryan, looking at those unregulated products, and they're able to managers to create offering and not be regulated, not have any supervision over that. It is actually quite scary.
We've definitely had clients come to us who, and we found when they get to a certain balance size and they're starting to feel or have had an experience on some of the particular micro-investing platforms, that they then are coming to get advice when they've had a poor experience. So it's almost they're learning through doing on that basis. I mean, as we've had an upward market for a very long time here, do you think that there's quite a big, Andrew, do you think there's quite a big, almost a reputational risk that might happen on the industry as we head into volatility with these different products not being regulated, or what's your?
Well, I think it's going to call it out, isn't it? If there's a if there's a correction and there's some grumpy, burnt investors, then it's going to be, well, where was the FMA when all this was happening? There'll be a fight to blame someone for why they've lost their shirt. Look, I think there's always a trade-off, isn't there, between choice and regulation, and we don't want to regulate choice right out of the market. I don't think that's the intention. I think the challenge is also that regulation is always constantly sprinting to keep up with what's changing out there, and Ryan touched on that. These things are happening so fast. I think the regulators are, they're always a yard or two behind, trying to catch up with what's happening out there in the market, and so. But I think it's inevitable, and with the likes of crypto and some of these other investment opportunities, my favorite patter around this is you can love it or hate it, but you can't ignore it. And I think investors have the right to choose. I think they should have the right to choose, and I like to see some of these products democratized, so mum and dad investors do have the opportunity to invest in some of these. It's not just the highly technical people or the highly financially well-off people. That everyone has an opportunity in some way, shape, or form. But I do think there does need to be more regulation around some of this stuff, and I think it will pay dividends in the long run, because my fear is that, yes, when the markets turn down, people, and we saw this happen last time, when the markets turn down and people do lose their shirt, there are going to be negative experiences that are going to drive them away from this, which is not in the long-term best interest of people saving for their retirement and investing for the long term.
So on that basis, do you think regulators can actually move quickly enough for the products that are coming through? Or do you think there's other ways that we could regulate this as an industry?
Look, I think they can. And I think there's been examples of the regulators being quite nimble in recent times. And I know there's a bit of activity at the moment with the FMA and the wholesale space, requesting of data from various wholesale schemes and so forth, which I think we shouldn't underestimate. I think the regulator, I mean, we can all move quite quickly these days when we have to. So I would say, for operators out there that are relying on various loopholes to do certain things, I think there's an appetite from the regulator to close those down pretty quickly, and you might be in trouble. You might get caught out. So I think the regulator can move quite quickly in some of these spaces where there's clearly egregious actions going on. But Harry, Ryan?
I just think on that, it's also a matter of funding for the regulator, and it's also a matter of their actual mandate, legal mandate as well. So as much as I think the actual authority can move quickly, it's also the legislation that needs to come in to manage it. So, and I don't necessarily have the faith that can be as nimble.
Yeah, and you look at it, funding but also resourcing within a whole industry, and you look at where we are currently. I think getting that gap plugged in, it's quite important. I think everyone in this industry, where there's risk compliance across banks, non-banks, managed investment schemes, everyone is kind of competing for similar resource. Getting that skill and being able to do that and to tackle some of those, it is quite important. I think we were quite lucky that in as I mentioned earlier, in New Zealand, we do have that. I think I'm looking at a managed investment scheme sector. We have very complying issuers and managers who are complying, and a lot of that regulation, to some extent regulation, I would say, because it's not regulation, has been managed by guidances, and issuers have been complying with those guidances. But that, as Ryan said, for some of those, you do need regulation, and then as you need to regulate and change legislation, there's a bit more work required around that area. Although the FMA do have some powers in terms of designating certain products to be more regulated under their legislation. So, and FMCA, sorry. So there is a bit of scope for that.
Nodding heads there. And thinking about other areas to regulate, what's your view on custodians? We have these client assets which sit with custodians, where there's no regulator and anyone could set one up in New Zealand.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I'd love to answer that myself if I could. I mean, this is something I'm quite passionate about, and I think people around the table here know that I'm quite passionate about this. I think of a custodian as where that's where the rubber hits the road. It's where you're transferring assets, it's where you're valuing assets, or you're converting something like a security into cash, and it leaves the door out of bank account, and you'll never see it again. It's the major area for me where there can be considerable fraud or error, within any sort of investment. So I do honestly think, and I'm very surprised coming from another jurisdiction into New Zealand, there is actually no licensing for custodians in New Zealand. Any person with a home office and a spreadsheet can sit there and be the custodian for billions of investment dollars and manage bank accounts, and they need absolutely no licensing whatsoever. And to me, that's really a worry. And I think it's also one of the big areas where, years ago when the IMF was looking at the regulatory space in New Zealand, was saying, well, this is a massive gap in the market. If you think about the sort of transactional volumes we're talking about as well, and the sizes of some of the transactions happening in the market, any one of those transactions could severely change, investment outcomes for people with any type of product, and now we're seeing more and more money spilling into KiwiSaver. I think that there's something here that really needs to be looked at, and that's not only just for funds and securities, but also now you're looking at micro investing platforms. They're holding the micro investing platforms themselves are their own virtual custodians, and they're holding a lot of cash and other assets on behalf of their members. And once again, there's no licensing for those platforms. Aren't licensed. Plus, there's no custodial licensing. So to me, it's sort of like a double whammy in terms of risk. So you're virtually running a financial product, and you're running a custodian platform, and there is no regulation whatsoever apart from AML, and the rest, anyone else could be doing anything else.
Harry, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that there are certain products that are there, because those platforms that Ryan was saying that and you could have other offerings, as we did with other areas in my investors having investors have lost money. I think looking at the context of managed investment schemes, I think supervisors themselves are actually custodians first and foremost, because we hold all the assets in our names. Now we then appoint sub-custodians where you go to those real assets, and then there's different types of assets. There's cash in the bank, and then there's units in another unit trusts, and there's real assets, what Ryan said, and that's where those you do engage some of those big custodian firms. But there is a bit of a challenge there, and I think from regulators' perspective, because a lot of those assets are held in the wholesale funds. So a lot of those assets you have, when you look at normal, offering, bigger managers would have, units, and then in set of wholesale funds to deliver their offering. And that's where those custodians and sub-custodians are appointed by the supervisor. There is some regulations around that, but I do agree with Ryan. There's certain areas and other products where that is, you don't have that oversight of the supervisors. You don't have some of that, and there could be potential issues that you don't have any regulation or anyone there overseeing that.
Yeah, look, I think the role of the custodian, I don't think is that well understood, apart from the outside the financial services industry, which understands it pretty well. I think the average investor doesn't really know what a custodian is and what they do, and yet it provides them a massive amount of protection. Look, the only thing I'll add to the conversation is I think it's only a matter of when, not if, that regulation in the space happens. And so I think let's make sure that regulation happens in a positive way for the industry, and that it adds rather than detracts from the role.
Okay, cool. We've got about 10 minutes to go, so I'll go through some other questions. I actually had one come through from the audience, which is asking whether you think the FMA might be moving away from a partnership model to more of an adversarial role. Any thoughts on that?
Definitely. I mean, I definitely see that there's more and more naming and shaming out there in the media from the FMA than there ever has been. So that's definitely, I think, a change in the way they're looking at things. Whether that's overall a step change, it's hard to tell. And I think currently with the flux of management in the FMA and new head coming in, it's very. I wouldn't be putting my money on saying that anything is sort of locked in at the FMA at the moment. I think with a new lead coming in within the next year or two, we'll see the new style of what the FMA is going to look like. But now I think it's more of what it's in flux.
Yeah, I think there are areas where FMA will be more adversarial, and I think, but I'm not sure that is necessarily managed investments MIS sector as much. I think there are areas that FMA will oversee, insurance and other parts, where they will take that approach. I think I do think that. There is still a partnership model with, as I said, I'm a firm believer that we have bill and comply industry and across managed investment scheme sector, and I do think that if you are bill and comply, you will work. FMA will work with you to the extent that you prove yourself, or you are not longer bill and comply. Then I think there will be adversarial approach to that, and. But I do think there are some other parts of the industry in a value chain that FMA will focus on and look at a bit more closely, and might take that approach, I believe.
I think definitely. I think they are becoming or intend to become more, and I think they've made no secret of that. There was a presentation recently by their enforcement team, which made their approach very clear. I think various speeches from Rob Everett and others have articulated they've moved through a phase of education and guidance and so forth, and now the rubber hits the road, and they expect the industry to be up to speed, to be educated, to be knowledgeable, and if issues arise, they will take more of a stick rather than a carrot approach to some of these things. So I think that's definitely coming. I don't think that's unexpected or even particularly unreasonable. I do agree with Harry in the sense that I think they'll be selective in terms of how they apply it. So industries that are willing compliers, that are generally cooperative, that are doing their best. I think that there will still be a room for a partnership approach, and I think that's in everyone's best interests. And I think the partnership approach has served us really well over the last few years. So I think that, but I think as Harry points out, I think there are sectors that just haven't listened or just haven't taken heed, and I think there'll be some actions followed up to enforce the FMA's views on that. Okay. So yes.
Yes, all round yes. I just want to ask you something that's close to my heart, and it's a bit of a shift, but do you think there's anything that we can be doing as an industry or yourselves as leaders in the industry to address diversity issues that we have within finance, and not just gender, but cultural diversities across the board? How do you think we can improve that, and you can help lead that? Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to go first. I think there's certain industries that are more dominated by certain sexes or cultures and so forth, and I think it's more about making sure that we're encouraging people at an early age to come into what were potentially male dominated industries in the past. I think there's definitely a lot of work being done out there in terms of the current people within the workforce, trying to make sure that we can be as diverse as possible. But I just don't think the numbers are necessarily there to be able to say there's 50-50 representation in management roles. I mean, I know at TE we try really hard. We have 54% of our staff are female, but only 39% of leaders are female. So, and we're desperately trying to see what we can do to be able to sort that out. I think 39 is pretty good, because considering the number of the number of females in the financial services industry. It's more, to me, around wanting to encourage more and more people at early ages to come into like I said, these industries that were once dominated by a certain sex. From a cultural diversity perspective, I definitely think we've got a lack of good talent coming into the country through the borders, particularly at the moment through COVID. I really do think that we need greater skill and people from different markets coming in to be able to share their experience in other markets and other cultures in New Zealand. And I'd love to see the borders open again relatively soon.
Helen, I'll quickly chime. Helen, I'll quickly chime in because I know we're running out of time. I think the biggest call out is the lack of Maori and Pacifica representation in our industry by a long shot. And we've taken one small step along that at Public Trust in terms of aligning with Tupu Toa and bringing in interns to try and do our little bit in terms of increasing that representation. I think we are very light in that space. I'll pass on to Harry.
I agree. There's a lot to add. I think the whole industry and being in this industry for 15 years has a bit of a, and I'm talking about, supervisory industry. I'm not going to go across the fund managers because it's been a lot more diverse. I think supervisory industry and all trustees, and there was a bit of stigma attached to that, who is actually the trustee. And if you look at historically who it was, and we have a lot of work to do. And I think, as Ryan said, it would be good to see those borders open to attract cultural diversity. I've been taking some, and then to promote more young people coming through. We have been engaged with entities like AUT trying to actually, spread the word what the trustee does. Not a lot of people know what a trustee and supervisor do, really. There's a lot more education that we need to go through and to open it up to the broader younger people to say, look, this is really, that can be, we can bring diversity in that in the industry, and it can be fun industry to work in because you do working with a lot of entities, a lot of stakeholders across the financial services market, and there's a big learning curve. So there's a lot of work we need to do, and I think we need to do that as an industry. And I agree with Andrew as well. It is not just females and other cultures, but Maoris, inclusion Maoris is very important as well.
Great note to end on there. Thank you very much, guys, for being part of this panel. Harry, Andrew, and Ryan, who has joined us from Melbourne. So he's got up extra early this morning. So thank you very much, mate. I think we can all take something away from today. I've been furiously making notes. So I think that you guys have it's been great that you've been so candid with your thoughts. So thank you for putting that time and effort in for us. So now it just comes to me to thank Public Trust again for supporting the session. Next up in the conference, we have the launch and the welcome from the conference team at 9:15. So make sure you dial into that one and enjoy the rest of your conference. I'd like to say a massive thanks to the conference committee who they are volunteers to put this huge event on, a lot of them. So great job again, guys. And Morena, have a great morning, everyone. Thank you.